Thank you. So
I
here we
didn't do
go.
that.
So hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chaos Community Call. It is August 20th, 2020. So we have a few things that I think we'd like to take a look at today. Um, so if somebody could, I suppose I should get this going. Add yourself to the minutes. I didn't do that.
Do you want me to screen share or do you want to screen share them?
Um,
I don't care.
Sure. I don't care either. So hold on, I'm just trying to get the minutes up. So if you could add yourself, we had a fairly light agenda today. I think the biggest thing was to take a look at open issues and PRs that we might have in the repository, and then also it's really about identifying any metrics that we want to put on the radar for moving forward. So honestly, that's about it. Were there other things that people wanted to talk about today in common?
No.
Yes, no? Okay. Well, why don't I go? Sean, I'll just share my screen here. No problem.
Right on. All good. As far as I'm concerned, is Dawn not able to join today?
She's at
What
KubeCon.
CubeCon? That's right.
KubeCon.
Getting all cubey with it.
So, all right. So here's our repo. I did actually have a question kind of for Kevin. Kevin, these release note metric or release note issues,
Yes.
do we close these when we're done?
So I closed the one for 2020-08, which was the last regular release. And when I closed that, I immediately opened this release notes
For the next
2021-02
one.
to capture the discussion for the next 6 months.
Okay, gotcha.
I can close these at release time, basically, but it should probably stay open until then.
No, that's no problem whatsoever.
The individual issues for the candidate metrics,
Yeah.
I think those can be closed by the working group when they are ready to be released or when it's through the comment period. Right?
Sounds good. So basically, every working group, sorry, Gary, every working group has this issue in it, essentially. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
On the comment period, I thought we wanted to keep it open until the release so that we don't open and close it, open and close it.
Yes.
It's ready, it goes on the website, and it stays under review until the release. And just 30 days before the release, we have a concerted effort to review everything that is under review.
Correct.
Okay, so this issue will just basically stay open for 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it's closed and just replaced by another one.
And then to Georg's point, when we open up the individual metrics for the comment period, that issue will stay open until the working group signs off on it at right before the release.
Gotcha.
So we won't. So that can be open 6 months, 5 months, 4 months as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. What do you say so it looks like we have a number of kind of metric related things in issues here.
Let's see them.
Yeah, so one is a large, whenever I see large scope discussion or something tagged epic, as is, I think there's an epic tag. I'm usually, you don't have it on here. It's on a different issue. It's in I think it's in the diversity and inclusion working group. There's one of the
I'm also
issues
trying to click on your Zoom screen, which is hilarious.
Well, look, it worked. Good job.
So it did.
All right. So
Is this
what? This is you, Sean. Or at least you, in the sense of you kicked it off.
I kicked it off. I think this is part of the solution to this is the repository with a shared set of organizational mappings.
Oh, that's this.
I think that's where this ended up. I don't think we logged it under this issue, but
Okay.
I believe that discussion that Daniel and I had on a community call about that
I see.
is related. So we should make a comment to that effect and assign Daniel and I.
Is there there's a repo for that, isn't there?
I don't know if we created it or not.
I think Daniel did.
That very well could be.
Let me take a look. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm almost positive there was a repo for this.
I know we talked about it. I don't know if it's there.
Not health reports. Not Grimoire Lab stuff. Okay, sorry. I'm looking at my screen. Yep, here it is. I'll pull my screen back up. So this one, Sean. Isn't that this, what you're talking about?
Affiliation data, bingo, yes.
That's the one, right?
Yep, yep,
So can you link to this and then close this issue?
yep. I can do that. What, is it in our repo or is it in a different repo? The issue?
Yeah, it's CHAOSS org affiliation data.
Yeah, oh wow, I didn't realize you could create issues at the org. Oh, no, never mind. I'm just gonna, never mind. I realized what stupid thing I just said and I'm gonna pretend I didn't say it.
Okay.
I just have to get to my own computer here.
All right, so Sean is taking care of that. Hey, we're gonna close an issue. All right, so discussion, moving on. So basically, for those of you that aren't familiar with this discussion, which is great that it's going to close, is that Sean and Daniel have been looking at a way to, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but track org affiliation that could be used by both Grimoire Lab and Augur, so that both tools don't need to maintain it.
Is this an opt-in database or?
Yeah, it would. So I think the idea is that we're going with domain organizational affiliation, that we're not email. Well, I don't know. I
think it's not the person. I think it's only it's just the company or the organization.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so the idea is that both tools or both folks working on tooling were maintaining essentially or wanted the same list. So why not aggregate that work? So that's what that is. Cool. Thank you. I'm going to skip to one to Georg from 2018, a metric idea project, segments by time zone. And to me, some of these could kind of lead into our next issue, which is what do we want to work on for the next release?
Reviewing this, I think we may have covered it with the days and times metric. If we have a filter in there to look at different modules for that information, which is something that I don't know.
The last discussion that was a big discussion in common about time zones, and it was a long time ago, was basically that we were using the local developers UTC offset, which is usually in the Git log as a proxy. Some people are able to get IP address, and that's a better proxy. But I think GitHub's pretty restrictive about how much of that you can get. Like you can't really get it for every commit. Or maybe you can. And but you'd have to use the GitHub API to make all those calls instead of mining the Git repo yourself.
Okay, so
Does GrimoireLab have a way that they solve that? We were using UTC offset on the developer's local commit time.
Sorry, what is the question about solving with UTC?
Basically, the time zone is kind of used to approximate where on Earth you are, although it's an imperfect, it's a fuzzy kind of logic.
Right.
so what's the question? Does GrimoireLab use UTC?
Yeah, or do they use the offset, the developer offset, for when you're trying to show location?
I think we have both. We have one field with local time and one field with UTC time.
Right. So yeah, that's the way that we've guessed. Somebody mentioned on a prior call the use of IP address, but I have not looked into that.
So Georg, what's the? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think this one's closable.
I think it is closable, and I'm
Okay.
writing a comment right now.
Okay.
I'm just copy pasting some.
Let's
There.
see the comment.
There it is. I wanted this to be clickable. Need to add a space. There, now it's fixed. I like how GitHub updates it.
It is pretty nice, isn't it?
Mm.
So is this a filter already in the metric? Okay.
So project segments by time zone. We have the activity dates and times, which is time zone information. And we have a filter segment by community, or we could have it by
Where is the
segment
filter?
repository. Last one.
Segment by community.
So in my opinion, we already provide this. It's just for someone who wants to understand this information, to know to go to this metric and apply that filter. It's always a concern.
It's the number of metrics we have and their utility are, I think, getting to the point, and this is an example where some kind of index of questions answered, because I think Georg's right, there are questions that people ask that are answered by a particular way of implementing a metric.
Yep.
And so, but the name of that metric may not always be, make it crystal clear that you can answer that question using that metric. And this is a good example of that. So, I think it's a future thing to think about as the number of metrics exist grow, having an index of them.
So an index of metrics that's driven by
the
questions that are being asked.
Yeah.
And this can help locate people to particular. Is this right?
Yes.
Locate limitations. Answer their question or whatever. Yeah.
Is that right?
I think so.
Is it right enough that when we bring this up later, it will remind you what we're talking about?
Yeah, because to me an index means essentially like the book index, where you've got if each metric is a short chapter, then the index lets you look at more granular things. So you may not think that chapter is about what you want it to be about, but if you look in the expanded index, you can find what you're looking for. So it's a way of navigating at a lower granularity, or perhaps even a higher granularity if your question requires several metrics.
So we already kind of do this with focus area, right? Our focus area questions are kind of guides you to where you need to be.
It's a structured, that's sort of structured information behavior though. People, maybe some kind of way of searching our metrics is another way to think about it.
So we somewhat do it through the focus areas and the goal question metric approach, but that is limited to one question. And by filtering in a certain way, the same metric that we defined can answer different questions. So if we wanted to keep it in the goal question metric approach, then we would add more and more questions, and then we would need more metric detail pages which reference the atomic metric or the original metric, and then say, use this with these modifications.
And it'll answer this local question.
So one of the things I've been struggling with lately is that the way we deal with metrics, they kind of belong to certain working groups. And I don't really think individual metrics should. I mean, a working group is obviously working on defining it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that working group owns that metric. And we talked about this a little bit the other day in the risk working group and in the community working group, is that we don't have a way of handling duplicate metrics in working groups, where this metric is very important for this focus area, but it's also very important for another focus area, and it's possibly also very important for another working group.
And so like, for example, I've asked for a different category on a metric because I forget what metric it was, but I think it might have been commits came up as
it was lines of code.
Lines of code came up as a metric that's important for some risk evaluation, but obviously it already exists in evolution. So in the spreadsheet, we'd like to indicate that we've identified this as a risk relevant metric, but we're not creating it because it already exists. So like there's a code for, it's like a pull request that doesn't get merged effectively, but we still want that indexed with risk, so that if people are looking at risk, they could see these are metrics that are pertaining to risk, even if they're not risk metrics.
Can I make a comment? I think we have two things we're talking about here. So one is the first was the creation of an index that would help people locate quickly, irrespective of working groups.
Right.
So has anybody ever done that work before? Like, I totally agree with you, Sean. I think that's a good idea, particularly as our metric set continues to grow and we do have filters. And right now, the questions, to Georg's point, that we kind of assign to a metric, they're kind of high-level questions, but based on how you might implement a metric, you could answer slightly different questions. So super interesting, and I 100% agree with you.
I know, like we could hire a library science student. That's what I've done before. When I've been in iSchools, which I was for a long time, I just hire a library science student to do this kind of work, and they're actually very good at organizing things.
So is this a technical problem? Is it an organization problem?
I think it's an information, behavior, and access problem. And,
okay.
I mean, you've probably got students in your program who have that interest or specialization. I've got students across the street with that specialization at the master's level that probably could help us out part-time. Obviously, like Kevin and Georg and you and I and John and probably everybody on this call is capable of this, but how much time do we have?
I'm not capable of it because I don't know I don't know what it would look like. I don't understand how, given the current structure that we have, that we could create an index that would help people answer specific questions and then present them with information that said, here's the metric with these filters. Part
of how we're going to get there is this survey that we're releasing, where people ask for the community report, because we're asking them what questions they want answered. And as we go about answering those questions, then we probably have we should keep a Google Doc that says, okay, this is a question that came up, and here are the metrics we used to answer it. Here are the tools that provided useful answers, and it can become a little bit of an FAQ. And then if Linux Foundation lets us throw a search engine into that part of our website, we have a lot of what we need. And there's software that will identify indexable words or words that belong in indexes.
Okay.
I was just going to bring up the limitations that we do have with our WordPress install. So I think Kevin should be the one to kind of, sorry, Kevin. I just realized I'm volunteering you for this, but I think that you are the expert, so you would know like what our limitations are as far as technology goes and how we could, what plugins are available, et cetera. So I think we should really use Kevin's guidance on some ideas.
I agree. If Kevin knows what Kevin has got a better sense of what the LF will do and what they won't do for us with regards to plugins.
So I wanted to also point out that the app ecosystem working group is working on this issue of how do we know what metrics we want to pay attention to.
Right.
So completely leaving behind the structure we currently have and thinking from, hey, these are the stakeholders, these are the questions and goals they have, and then identifying metrics that are relevant. So work like that can help fill this in. The survey that Sean mentioned can help us. And then when it comes to building out the index, if the website does not provide the features we need, I'm okay with thinking blank slate, maybe get someone from library science if we can find someone good there to build the system. It doesn't have to be within our website.
Yeah, and like the ones that I've seen or done that are useful on an ongoing basis do require some curation. I mean, it's not something that you do once and then you're done, because it's just not. So there's an initial effort, but then there's also maintenance on it. It's like software that way.
Oh, Matt, click on that event activity organizers. That's where we dive into more the heading.
What do you want me to click? Oh, this one.
Yeah. If you look at that, that's where we've gone from the goals. Oops, sorry, at the top. That's where we've gone from the goals questions all the way down to the metrics and data. It's still somewhat high level, but if we encapsulate goal, question, metric, data, and each one of those as one flashcard in our index, and we find a good way to sort it, maybe we have one catalog that is sorted by question and one that is, I'm thinking about physical flashcards right now in the library, and another one that is sorted by goals, and we can find these.
So the index doesn't necessarily allow people to ask any question. It allows them to ask a question, and we can say, hey, we have a question similar to that, or we have the exact question that you're asking.
It forces them to know our jargon less in order to get started. That's the advantage of some kind of indexing.
So it's in part of creating the index, kind of like what is here, and then in part kind of creating the machine that can map the question that a person who comes to the index might ask, and mapping what they want to know to what we have already indexed. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
That is correct.
We could maybe also do this when we do get a forum, that people ask questions as a topic on the forum, and then we discuss how our current metrics help answer that. And
Gotcha.
then if you search the forum with your question, you can be directed to the questions others have asked. So
Yeah.
Okay. So this doesn't preclude the way that we're currently building metrics, correct?
No, no, I think the way we build them is working. I don't want to
Okay.
build them differently. I just think we need to recognize we're creating a lot of information, and the more that we create, the more we'll have to do to help people navigate that
Okay.
in order to
Agreed.
consume it. That's all. It's like a natural. It's a natural evolution, I think, of the project, and it's good to like. I think it looks like the app ecosystem group is thinking in somewhat that direction already.
Okay. So all of this discussion stemmed from Georg's 2 lines here, just to remind people as to why we were having that discussion in the first place. So I think this can close. Is that correct? So I think this issue can close.
Yeah,
This
I
issue
think
can
so.
close, but it did unlock kind of perhaps a need for being able to locate people a little bit better
Okay,
in
metrics.
in the metrics,
Yeah.
particularly as we start thinking about filters, because that provides different views and answers different questions.
Yeah.
yeah.
And some of this can be like yeah.
Okay.
And that would then also solve Kevin's concern, because when we think about the index, we no longer are confined to the working groups that are owners of the metrics.
Right, because then a question is basically aimed at the project in its entirety,
Yeah.
right?
I would say that
Okay.
that partially takes care of it, but there's still a little bit of a working group coordination issue where we are actually, I think there is a slight issue with the way that the metrics work is being done, and it's due to a lack of coordination between the working groups.
Well, I think
Duplication is becoming an issue.
but we've solved it by coordinating because people cross enough working groups so far.
So far, but as we get more and more metrics, this process is going to it's becoming more and more complex, and it's a little harder to catch some of this stuff.
Our capacity to even remember we wrote that metric in a different working group 2 years ago diminishes.
Yes.
I have one suggestion on the cross-referencing of the metrics in the working group. Like we don't create a separate tag in our Excel sheet. We keep the same, which is already released in another metric, and just write the name, keep the same green tag, which is released, and then in the comments we write, refer to this particular working group for the detail of the metric. So in this way, we have a cross-referencing, we don't have a new tagging, and the metric is already released. We are just giving it a pointer.
So just kind of putting it here in
Yes.
the remarks comment, formally released
Released in a particular working group.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so like it would say like formally released in
Yes.
Common.
As opposed
Right.
to the
Yes.
artist formerly known as Prince.
Gotcha.
Yes.
That's not a terrible idea.
Now the question then becomes: do we just kind of do it when we realize it, or do we make a concerted effort to go through and say these metrics that were already released are relevant to focus group where space?
I think what I'd like right now is just to state that of a metric in a working group where we can say the state is released in a different working group or something like that. So that, and the color is different, so that then the working group knows they don't have to work on it, and that it exists in the outcomes of another working group. And if we do the within working group index, that will lead us that way. That will almost naturally evolve into something we can eventually matrix.
Okay, so we tag that as formerly released in Common when we're
Yeah.
having metrics ideas. conversations, like
Yeah, like we had around lines of code and risk.
oh, that already exists. Okay, so add it to the
Yeah.
focus group and mark it as, or add it to the focus area and mark it as formally released in there.
Yeah, and I think previously we've been deleting lines when that happens, and where that has become problematic is the same idea comes up again in the working group. So if it comes up and we identify a pointer to another working group, keeping that pointer in this list, I think is going to keep us from walking
Yeah.
over already
Is the-
treaded ground.
Even if the that metric is not released, but still in consideration, we can keep in consideration and point it to the
Yeah.
working group. Like
Yeah.
we don't create a separate tag for it, so tagging will remain same, and we'll just
Yeah.
have a pointer for that.
I agree.
What
Like,
you're describing is it's a very informal process.
it's a different
which is maybe all we
category.
can do, right?
It's a different category and a different color, and the purpose it serves is it allows each working group to maintain a list of metrics that are relevant for the questions they have without having to like look at 5 different working group pages to figure that out. Like,
But I'm just, the identification of that duplication and cross-referencing is it's very informal.
It is. Well, it is. But like when when like risk and evolution are and value and common, which are the ones I participate in the most. I mean, if something comes up, there's usually more people than me in the discussion that remembers that it's in a different working group as well. And I expect that to be the case for the foreseeable future.
Or there is one additional thing we can do to that cross-referencing only. Like we put it in the particular working group metric that this is considered or released under this metric, cross-reference in other working group, and we can create a single tab for only for the cross-reference metrics. That will tell us, okay, these metrics are cross-referenced in 3 groups or 4 groups. So in this way, we have an index of the metrics which are cross-referenced and are pointed to the working groups also.
I guess I didn't follow that exactly, but it didn't sound wrong.
So is the point of this cross-referencing, because this sounds super messy to me, and so I'm trying to understand like the value that it gives us. And so is
the value in risk and evolution is that if the metric already exists somewhere and we think of it and start talking about it, we immediately know it's already exists, and we keep it on the list.
You'll just put it in this sheet and say somebody already developed it, but we like it too.
Right. It's come up in risk and it's come up in evolution where people have and in common where people have ideas for metrics that already exist in a different working group, or all of the metrics in that family of metrics already exists in a different working group. And so it really, I mean, it happens.
Okay.
It's not uncommon.
And so then
occur in a meeting these days.
I think it could be helpful for, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'm done.
I think it could be helpful for people who are visiting the site who are interested in code development metrics as well. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in code development metrics. And then when I go there and I look, I see, well, there's only 4 there.
I don't follow that. What's the value in that? The first one I get, like, and I also understand, I think Sean's point of being able to identify that it's done, I think also addresses the concern that perhaps 2 working groups are actually working on the same metric. And this way you could at least say, why don't we just work on it over there? So what was your case, Kevin?
I think individuals are often interested in metrics kind of based on the focus areas that we've created. Right? So I can envision a scenario where a community manager is interested in a certain set of metrics that are associated with code development. So code development is an evolution focus area. And when you go there, there are maybe 4 or 5 metrics that are defined within that focus area, right? However, we know that there's a considerable number of metrics that can be associated with code development, right? or code development activity.
Right, like the contributor metrics, some of them are in common because
Right.
contributors, it's a broader category of things that span issues and code and other activities like documentation. And,
So if we,
and
yeah, so if we started cross-referencing that, a user visiting the site looking for code development activity type metrics would then see more than just those 2 metrics that are currently released. They could see, you know, all of the metrics that we've defined that relate to code development activity.
Sure.
And some of those metrics are probably defined in other working groups. Right?
Yeah, I actually think that's a different way of saying what Sean had said too. Yeah. You were giving a use case. Okay.
yeah.
And so
I'm going to jump in here really quick. Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I was going to say originally I was very much against the idea of dropping every idea in this spreadsheet. But what might also be helpful is if we see that 2 or 3 or the rest of the groups are all pointing to the same metric, then we will know that that's a candidate that should be moved over to common. And I don't really think we have a process right now for officially saying this thing belongs in common, do we? Or is it just kind of something that we feel like everybody could use, so we move it to common? But this would be more of like a procedure. Yeah. So it would be a little bit more official to identify that, oh yeah, this should be in common, because we can clearly see now that there are 3 other working groups that are pointing to the same thing.
Yeah. But I share Kevin's opinion that in the future, we may not organize our metrics according to the working groups that created them when we present them to the broader community. Like this is our working document, and we may choose a different form of organization as we learn more about how people want to consume these metrics and are consuming them. This is great for working groups. I'm not saying don't change anything. I'm just saying. I'm just saying is we're starting to run up against a volume of information.
Yeah.
We just have to think about how someone's going to consume it. Right?
Yep. No, that's totally fair. Right, because at some point, like the metric does have to be developed somewhere, and that's going to just end up in a working group. Yep. All right. These are 2 like huge issues, just so to me. So Kevin, your concern is that right now this is happening too informally. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. And while it may work right now, it's going to stop working as we get more and more metrics.
It started to get a little bit brittle when we were having discussions about forks in 3 working groups.
Okay.
Decided it belonged in common, but it took far too much discussion to get there. In my humble, I mean, not that it was bad discussion, but we hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah. So as a possible way forward, Kevin, is it something that needs to be, what you envision is something that needs to be done to this spreadsheet?
So the reason I keep on mentioning the spreadsheet is because, once again, the spreadsheet is this one area where all of the working groups coordinate together. If there's another tool, then another tool is fine. We need to think more about how we are coordinating together as the CHAOSS community between the working groups, and how we're organizing the work that we do. So in my mind, it's kind of the working groups own the focus area, but the metrics kind of belong to everyone.
So do you have a proposition on how to move that forward?
I do not, other than some
Seriously,
for the time being, just some changes in the spreadsheet that might help us with that. But in the future, I'm not sure what we can do.
For now, the lightest weight thing to do is just to give us a category for that in the spreadsheet.
And what is that? What is the category? What is it? What's the category called?
Cross-referenced. or yeah, cross-referenced, and you could just say it's this metric exists in a different working group, and then we should expect that the remarks will tell us which working group if we're not, dumb about how we do it.
Okay, so maybe and maybe I could make it a slightly off shade of green, so that it means
Sure,
that it's part of that. It means
Yeah.
that we like this metric. It's kind of a released thing
Yes.
for us.
Yes. Yes, and I will never again recolor cells, and I will fix the recoloring that I've done. It's on my
Because
list.
then you could look at a focus area
Yeah.
like who, and see, you could basically just say all the green things in there, whether they're dark green or light green,
Right.
are what constitutes who in this case.
And at some point in the future, probably 2 releases from now, we may decide to release the metrics according to that sort of cross-reference as it emerges. I don't think we want to change anything for a year, but I think in a year we might decide to include that cross-referencing in released metrics for working groups.
Okay.
But that's not. I don't want to do that right now. That's a lot of work for Kevin. We got a system at work. Let's go through 2 more release cycles with it before we talk about breaking.
Gotcha. Okay. I'll make that change in the spreadsheet, but this still requires kind of the human person to know that this is happening. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Honestly, it's better coordination than I have with anyone at my university right now. So.
Okay. All right. Did that close anything for us? No. All right. I think that was still actually related to Georg's 2-statement issue, two-statement comment. All right.
I'm a troublemaker.
You only said 2 things, and it took 40 minutes. All right.
It's good.
This is this is good. This is super helpful. All right. So we do have a new metric. I do think that's an action item for me that I haven't done, which is this. So sorry. Are there any, maybe in the remaining couple minutes, are there any other metrics on this list that kind of jump out to people with respect to conversations that have come up in risk or value or D&I or evolution?
One of the ones that I know people are interested in is the time to merge, similar to time to close, but actually it might be just a filter on time to close was this merge request or pull request closed because it was merged or not?
Yeah, I think that's a filter.
So we're back to this idea of creating an index or some form of referencing saying, hey, if you want time to merge, implement time to close with these parameters, with these filters.
So did I capture that right? Perhaps this is a filter.
Yes.
Time to close. Okay. Any others? Sean, do you see anything in here that
it would be cross-referenceable?
Nope, that is just a metric that maybe isn't something that we've worked on in common that would be a candidate. I have to bring burstiness forward.
Yeah, what is burstiness?
Just like a burstiness of activity, so like burstiness of issues or burstiness of pull requests or burstiness of email. I'm working on that.
I'm not sure. Why is that a different metric than just visualizing the burstiness of issue volume?
Like a
Like, is
filter
that-
on issues?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, burstiness is visible in all dimensions of software work. You'll see bursty pull requests, acceptance, bursty commits, and bursty issues. Usually they circle around a release or the end of the year, but sometimes around other things. So I guess what I'm saying is burstiness is a characteristic of how data is shaped when we visualize it. And I'm not saying I don't think it's a bad issue. I don't think it's a bad metric to create. I'm just trying to think about how we would create it. I think we should move it forward. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay.
I don't want to, because I think people will understand burstiness of activity. And I think that may be a composite. That is not an atomic metric, nor is it a program or project. I think it is a synthetic metric. I think it will draw on existing metrics and say something about them.
Agreed. It's a way of analyzing it. It's not a filter either. It's a way of looking
No.
at other atomic metrics.
Yeah, and you have to look at multiple atomic metrics to understand burstiness. You can't just look at one. Well, I mean,
Okay.
you can, but I guess it depends how you define burstiness too.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time, meaning we're past time.
It's an REM album.
Yeah, not the running part, but
Out of time.
Sean,
So we should collapse into now and end the meeting.
Sean and Vinod, do you want to bring these up next week? Perhaps
Yeah.
language distribution and technical forks. We could start with those.
I think that will be our reckoning, yes.
Okay, why don't we start with those next week? We can start kind of talking about what goes in, and maybe we can even spend some time just like in D&I this week. We just spent some time working on a metric. It was great.
Yeah. Tables
Okay.
of the reconstruction.
Okay.
I'm just saying REM albums now. And
I
trying to
know.
make a
They're
context.
just means nothing. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Catch you later. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.